Hello everyone and welcome to my digital studio visit. For those of you thinking I will be walking around with my cell phone, I'm sorry to disappoint. Most of my work is digital already, so we'll be doing a digital presentation. So let us begin. I will first introduce myself for those that don't really know me, then introduce my work, and then explore today's topic, which is digest on the Berit and Robert comics that I'm developing here during my residency. So let us begin. So welcome again to my digital studio visit. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Felipe. I was born in Brazil, and I'm an illustrator, animator, and comics creator. And for the past few years, I have been doing children's books, and that tries to explain introduction to scientific concepts in a simple manner for kids. And the topics that we worked on were like why kids, the water cycle, and explaining where fire comes from, why fire is dangerous, the solar system, and how should you treat your pet, and things like that that generally kids should know and sometimes they don't. I also worked, and yeah, here are some examples. And I also worked a lot with animations. And these are some samples of the character sheets I would do for animations, where here it's a breakdown of the colors used for the character, some facial expressions when the animator will go and do his animation. He can use for reference. This is also another project that I did here, Five Little Monkeys, which is an American song. Here we have the colors, the color palette for those characters. I also worked a lot doing storyboards. Here we have like the image with the action that is taking place and the sound which correspond to the place on the song. These are just some samples of the things I did. Here's another sample of a storyboard. The scene, what's happening in the image, and here we have the dialogue, what is happening, action, what will happen, and the sound effect. Here it was a rain sound effect. This was a simple video about a joke. And most of my work that I did, even previous doing this work with the kids' books, I always try to do something that's more comical and playful. Because I think life is already sad enough. It's always good to have something funny and uplifting. These are some background samples that I did for a railroad song. And I also worked on a mobile game where I did the whole planning and project management and the art assets for this project. And it's exploring the same idea of the water cycle, but now trying to introduce this concept to young kids through a game or a mobile app. It can be downloaded still on Amazon, Android, Play Store, and iTunes, whatever those are called. I don't remember exactly. And here's the user interface that I did. And on my personal work, I always try to work combining two things. I like to work with slices of life and something more comical, trying to bring more humor into normal life situations. And this is for those who maybe were here at Bratio from last year. We gave away this comic actually. So maybe you recognize it or not. I don't know. But it's a sample. This is a project I did with my wife where we did 5 books about our lives in Japan. used to live in Japan. We lived there for 9 years before coming here to Sweden. Another project I did was this small comic small in size comic about a zombie detective. I like the idea of zombies because, again, not they're kind of whimsical in a way, because they're supposed to be scary and kind of like horror, but they're so unbelievable that I think they have a comical aspect to them. So I always like to combine them in normal life situations to see the absurd of it and how funny it becomes. So Detective Jones, it's a zombie detective that works for humans in silly cases like trying to find the lady's dog or trying to find a hot dog stand, but he doesn't do, and trying to solve murder mysteries. And another project that I did but it was more on the slice of life, was a project that's based on the Total English Lifeline. They based the story on real life callers, and I did this project with them. It was a commission project. And after that, I started working again with trying to mix the whimsical, comical. I decided I like a lot the aesthetic of post-apocalyptic movies and comics in general. And one thing that I wanted to do was to combine Mad Max, the last movie that came out, the Fury Road, and all the aesthetic of cars and everything with something comical and zombies. So a way that I thought it would be funny to do that was to combine with what if it was a ice cream apocalypse? The whole world ran out of ice creams. So again, human race became zombies because they were driven mad by the desire of ice cream, and now they walk around battling each other for ice creams, and they have fancy cars that they tune up again similar to the Mad Max aesthetics, but still trying to be a little bit funny and comical. So this is a Prius, which is supposed to be an environmentally friendly car, but it has a engine on it. They swapped the engine, so it's very pollutive. So trying to combine these two things and having fun with it while doing it. Well, I did have a lot of fun. Oh yeah, and one thing, these different views of the vehicle I did put here because for those that you don't know, when you're doing, this was a fake game project that I worked on. And when you're doing building drawings that's supposed to be viewed in 3D, someone will build it in 3D later on, you need to have all the different view angles of that object. So someone can go and translate that into a real or a 3D object. And continuing with the mixing slice of life and a little bit of humor, I started doing a comic that's called Felipe's Adventure, which I'm mixing all my daily life here in Sweden, what's happening here, with some little doses of humor. And this was something I for those that you that do know the laundry room here, Konstepidemin, I always have a lot of trouble with the dryer, and this is something that happened, and I thought it would be interesting and funny to transform into a comic, and this is the result. This is still an ongoing project, and I'm still working on a few different ideas. Which brings us now to Berit and Robert, Konstepidemin story. So when I first arrived here at Konstepidemin with my wife last year, we stayed at the Robert studio. And I always thought it was fascinating that we were staying at the studio where one of the founders of the art center Konstepidemin stayed. And I got so interested and curious about the whole story, how the art center became and what was this place before, how were the rooms used before, because a lot of the buildings have doorways that are closed now, windows that are not in use. So I always felt so interested and intrigued of how things became to be what they are today. And I was always talking to people and saying that, and then it came to me the idea of trying to work that into some kind of a project. So what way could I merge the story of Konstepidemin with something comical and whimsical? So I decided to do a different story for the foundation of Konstepidemin. And since we were staying at the Studio Robert, I thought, oh no, Robert has to be one of the main characters of the story. Because we were staying at his studio, so I felt a connection with him. So I thought I should include him. And I always like to working with couples on my main characters, so I decided that I should also research, and then I found out that Berit was his wife, and I thought, oh, so that could be something interesting. So I talked to Berit Jonsvik, and she said she thought it was quite amusing, the whole idea of becoming a main character in a comic. And I started to exploring this idea. So for my comic, although I know that Konstepidemin became to be something around the 80s, I thought this was too recent history to work with, because I wanted to work something more whimsical, mixing the mythological with science. And I thought maybe around the 1920s would be something better. So I started doing some research of Swedish fashion on the 1920s. And it was really hard to come by with pictures, or pictures that were nice. But these are some of the pictures that I used as sample to start to base the fashion of Robert and Berit. And I was also researching about the furniture inside of houses, because I have no idea or no knowledge of how things were here in Sweden in the 1920s. And it's a world apart from my childhood, where I was brought in Brazil, and it's completely different. So it's something hard to grasp, and it's even more work for me. Simple things like, did they have electrical lights inside their houses? I don't know. I tried to research. I don't even know if in Europe they had light in the 1920s. Or even the street, it was hard to find. Apparently they had gas lights in the streets around some point in France, but I have no idea. So although the 1920s is good because I can work with the more mystic themes on it, it's also presents new challenges because there's not a lot of information about that period. So I started to work on the characters. Although I borrowed Robert and Berit's names, I wasn't sure if I wanted to also make them look like the both or not. So I was a bit conflicted about that, because although I wanted people to see Robert and Berit and be like, I know these two. I recognize them from Konstepidemin. Or no, if I wanted to make them completely different, and then I could get away with some design freedom. But I thought it would be more interesting if they kept some of the resemblance of Konstepidemin, or of Robert and Berit, real life Robert and Berit. Since also Berit's still an active artist, I think it would be interesting if we could recognize them. So these were the first sketches I did. And then I tried to work on suits and clothing of the time, trying to better ways to sketch. And here I was experimenting a bit with Robert's face, how he was in the 1920s. I mean, he was not alive, but how he would have been if he was alive back then. Would he have a big beard or not? Only a mustache? I don't know. There's not even a lot of pictures of him online, so it's really hard to find any reference. And after that, I decided I will go all creative freedom, and I decided to give him like really strong muscle arms and Berit also a really muscular figure. And the whole story is that Robert and Berit are actually monster hunters, and the artist thing is only a facade for keeping appearances, because they didn't excuse why they stayed here at the Konstepidemin after the hospital closed down or shut down. So they decided, we will say that we are artists, and they continued to stay here. But the truth of the matter was that they were monster hunters, and they were keeping Konstepidemin safe from the first zombie outbreak that occurred here during the 1920s. So I had this first idea of the story, and now I needed to break down into something more tangible that I could start to work into a comic. So I wrote the synopsis, and after the synopsis, I started to break the synopsis into chapters. And then the chapters, I would write them further, and then I would do thumbnails of those chapters. And here's the thumbnailing of the first chapter, which we're gonna dive into page 1 and 2 into more depth, which are these two. So first chapter has 12 pages. And I only do a rough layout of how the page is going to be, some dialogue boxes. It's very loose, no commitment to anything has to be this way. Even page sizes change. This one's more square, this one is really long. I'm trying to stay as free as I can at this stage. So after I did those sketches, I translate them into A3. I'm working with A3 size here. And this one here on the left, I did all digital. And the one on the right, I did all the roughs in pencil. I wanted also to test 2 different ways of doing the comics, because I never had the opportunity to work with A3 printer and scanner, since like we have here. So I thought, let's try to implement this on my workflow. So I did this one on the computer, printed out, and I had this one already at hand. And I went and cleaned the drawings, used ink and pen to do the final art. And then I scanned those into the computer. And one problem that I realized about the one of doing the roughs digitally is that since the machine here is not actually inkjet, it's a laser printer, what happens is that the ink will stay on top of the paper, and it creates like a film or a coating on the paper, which it's difficult for when you're drawing for the ink to absorb in the paper. So this is something I did not expect, and it's something that I found out, which made me realize that I should work only on doing this roughs on paper and skip the computer part, at least for now. After I had the drawings in ink, I started coloring them. I wanted to choose a palette that was more pale, but have some more not vivid colors, but more contrasting colors for the characters. So your eyes will be more drawn to the characters than to the rest of the backgrounds. After doing the colors, I put the lettering. And these pages, after that, you can call them like officially done with the lettering and everything. And these are the first 2 pages. And here is just a recap of the process, how we went. This is the first rough thumbnail, tiny thumbnail of the page, and then the rough, the pencil of the page, and then the inks, color, and then with the speech bubbles. And this is how I work presently with all my comics projects also. And yeah, and that was a small preview into this project. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And if you're still here with me, I will open up now. If you want to do questions, I'm here. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. One thing that I thought it was interesting was that working on this project about a pandemic, or yeah, like a zombie outbreak, on staying at a previous epidemic hospital. I thought it was quite funny and interesting. Yeah. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to answer. Oh, so we have one question. When will the Konstepidemin comics be finished? So my plan, I don't have any plan for it to be finished. Since it's a personal project, I don't have any how do you say, deadline, like I need to finish by this date. But still, since I already did the first chapter, it takes me around 1 day per page. So I don't know how many pages the whole book will have, but it will be, I think it was 5 chapters. I have to take a look back, but I don't really know for sure. But it should be finishing 2-3 months, I hope, or maybe faster. Sometimes I do work faster on the pages if I don't have anything else to do in the day. So yeah. Did that answer your question, John? I hope it did. What else? Does anyone have another question? Keeping hydrated. Yes, most of my comics, John asked if most of my comics are a mixture of real life events and fantasy. Yes, most of my comics are. I do find fantasy and science fiction so much more interesting than boring little old life. So I always try to mixture some of fantasy or sci-fi. I did another comic about 2 weeks ago that was about the end of humanity. And it was also something like sci-fi, and yeah, trying to bring that. I find it more interesting. And it's also, zombies don't appear in real life, so you cannot have zombies with real life. But one story that I did, for the one that I did, it was a commission story for the Tokyo English Lifeline. That story was a fictional story, but it was based on real life stories of people that call the Lifeline. And that one was sadder. It's completely different from the tones of the stories that I work with normally, which are more whimsical and funny. That one was a more serious and sadder story, which it's about a Brazilian man that marries a Japanese woman. They go to Japan, but a lot of bad things happen and they end up getting split. And the wife takes all the kids, and because he's a foreigner in Japan, he has no rights to see his kids. And yeah, he thinks about suicide, but in the end, he finds his way and he managed to see his kids again. And so another question from Guilherme is, are you going to do comics in Portuguese also? I don't really know. I mean, the I if I have requests from people wanting to read the comics in Portuguese, I might do it. But I always feel that the broader audience will read it in English if I do it in English. It's weird. I never felt a connection to making it in Portuguese. Maybe I should. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. And is Julia helping you on this job? No, Julia's not helping me. Well, she's always helping me actually. She always gives me support and instant push me forward to keep going and try to help me whichever way she can. But this project is my solo project. Most of my projects now recently I have been trying to do them all by myself to learn more on each step and to grow more. And what else? Does anyone have another question? If not, I think maybe we can finish the presentation. Again, I thank you everyone for watching. If you want to follow the whole process of the continuation of the comic, of the Konstepidemin comic, the first comment on the chat of the video here, I posted the links for my Instagram. I do post updates of the projects I'm working on there. And you will probably see here and there a few pages. And I also put my portfolio link if you want to go and check out all my work more in depth. And I always open for commissions. If you want to commission some comic with me, just send me a message and let me know. And thanks everyone for enjoying. Have a good one. Bye.